Welcome to Transplants, a podcast featuring conversations with women thriving in new roots abroad. I'm your host, Laura Perucci, a Brazilian journalist calling NYC home for over a decade. Each episode, we unpack the transitions, culture shocks, setbacks, and joys of starting a new life in another country, so you can learn from their insights and make your own bold move. Because I truly believe real stories are the strongest way to spark real growth. Hi, and welcome back. My guest today is Emanuela Bucafuri. She's an Italian woman who has been living abroad for over 2 decades. What started as an exchange program that was supposed to last only 6 months ended up changing the course of her entire life. She began her journey in France, in Lyon, and then later she moved to Spain and then the Netherlands, and then she got back to Lyon. We talked about following curiosity, even when that means starting over in a new country and in a new language, and how Emanuela built her confidence and overcame insecurities throughout these experiences. We also dive into her advice on learning new languages, and trust me, she's a pro. She even taught herself German. So let's hear Emanuela's transplant story. Hi, Emanuela. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited about this.
Yes, me too. I was always just like starting this by saying ciao, coucou, bonjour, hola, because you speak so many languages and I'm going to talk about that. I always say that I like to start from the beginning. And I know that you've been living abroad for that's now like half of your life, 2 decades. And you've been you lived in the Netherlands, you live in Spain, you started your journey in France, and now you're back to France. But let's just go back to Italy, where you're from. So I want to know, where are you from in Italy, and how was your life growing up, and what kind of environment shaped you before any of these moves, before you starting your journey abroad? How was your life back in Italy?
I grew up in a region of deep southern of Italy, really the latest city on the continent, you see. And I grew up as a child in a small village. And I think that 2 factors shaped the adult time today. The first one is the women around me. Those women that worked hard home as housewives, mostly because of unemployment rates and somehow traditions. And, they worked hard home, but they didn't have hobbies or passions outside the wall of the house. Perhaps they were happy, but as a child, I internalized the idea that they didn't found their place in the world. I grew up as an adult in opposition of this model. In addition to that, my mother always encouraged me to be independent, to earn my money, to seize opportunities, and to take up space as much as I could. And this became my mantra somehow. See? The other factor was seeing people moving abroad to find new opportunities and building a better life abroad. So for me, has always been a possibility, the idea of extending myself beyond borders. So I think that there are the 2 factors that shaped me as the person I'm today.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And, in Brazil, we have a lot of influence from the Italian culture. Like a lot of Italians actually immigrated to Brazil. And I also grew up I was thinking about this the other day, actually, that most of the women around me were doing this, they were working in the house chores and, so similar. But my mom also telling me to be independent. And so, on your Substack, you connect the living abroad experience with your genuine curiosity and your love for storytelling. And we can tell that by your texts, by the posts that you share. So when did you first notice those parts of your personality? And before you moved abroad, how did you feed that curiosity and that storytelling instinct when you were living in Italy?
We come back again to my childhood, I guess. As an only child, I spent a lot of time alone, and I had to keep me busy somehow as much as I could. Books, comics, and notebooks were my companions, and I read a lot. And the characters of these books became sort kind of friends, and I start to write down their adventures on my notebooks. And my hero became Alice in the Wonderland. So
Oh,
that
I love
fed
that.
my curiosity. As a teenager in high school, I attended a high school focused on humanities and literature. And there I discovered the theater and the narrative arc of the hero. I think that this was the second ingredient for my love for storytelling.
Oh, I love that. You had great inspirations growing up. That's very inspiring. You already mentioned that you had these women around you that were living that life, and you're asking if they were living like a meaningful life, and your mom always told you to be independent, and you're seeing these people living abroad. So at what point you started to feel that Italy or that village or life was like too small for the dreams that you had? Was like this is some specific moment that you thought like I need to see what other places have to offer, or was more like something that built up naturally? How was that process for you?
I don't think there was a proper moment I saw Italy too small. I had already moved to the north of Italy. I made my study in Turin. There is a big city. So that was not the
Okay.
problem. I think I took an opportunity. I seized an opportunity to leave. It wasn't this one with the Erasmus program. It was another later on. The question now is more why I don't return back to Italy now, because I would feel that it's too small now, actually. Because living abroad for
Mm.
so many years, you mentioned half of my life, actually 20 years. After 20 years abroad, what I love in my life is being always with other person, having other cultural lens on the same situations. So if I come back to Italy, I would lose this filter that I have in front of my life, this rich exchange with all this diverse diversity around me. So it's for this
Mm-hmm.
reason that I keep living abroad, and that I think that was the best decision I made in my life.
Yeah, and like we said, you had like 2 decades living abroad, and like I mentioned, you had experiences in Spain and Netherlands, and you first moved to France. I wanted to know how everything started. You wrote that was through this Erasmus experience. I had never heard that name before. Can you explain more about this like first move to France? And I know it was supposed to be 3 or 6 months, but that's not what happened. But tell us, how was it?
That was an Erasmus program. So it's a student exchanges in the university across Europe. It's a program that was built in the 80s by Sofia Corradi, that was an academic that influenced politicals to bring this program to life, aimed to make others, European others, more open and curious about diversity across the continent. And I think she succeeded, at least with me, a million of other Erasmus students.
Mm-hmm.
So I arrived in France in 2006 for this program, and I was supposed to stay 6 months, but finally universe had other plans for me. I'm still here, or at least I've never returned back to Italy. To make a long story short, at the end of my semester, one of the professors proposed to stay for a PhD. And my dream was
Mm-hmm.
to work in research. Beginning, I was doubting a bit. I asked for opinion my friends, my parents, some professors, and then yeah, I decided to stay, and I never regret it.
Just like out of curiosity, what were you studying at that point when you moved to France for this exchange program?
I was an engineer student. I studied engineering, electronic engineering, and I was specialized in
Wow.
materials for nanotechnologies.
Because we see a lot of like guys in these fields, right? It's always fascinating to see women in this field too. So yeah,
Less
probably
than
not easy too.
less than 20% of women in this field. Mm.
How was life when you first moved to France? Like, I'm curious to know, like, you spoke the language. Did you know someone there, or was just like this completely new life where you didn't know anyone? And also, 2006, internet was not what it is today. So how are you feeling? Like, were you scared? Were you like super excited? And it was in Lyon as well, or is another
Yeah, I
city in
arrived in
France?
Lyon actually. Yeah, I didn't know
Oh,
this
okay.
city. I was in survival mode. The beginning was really that. I arrived with a plan, passing the exam, doing the experience, and then coming back home. And
Mm-hmm.
to do so, I had to pass the exam, but my French was very basic. I knew just some lines from Molière, Balzac, Flaubert. As I said, I studied in a high school focused on literature. So that was my baggage, my language baggage, and it was not so helpful
Mm-hmm.
actually. Daily life was very difficult, especially engineering studies with this literature baggage.
Yeah.
Misfit. I had a daily routine. I started very early, opening time in the cafeteria, 7 a.m., and I started translating word by word, with my dictionary, the upcoming
Wow.
lesson, to understand what the lesson would be about.
So your lessons were all in French
Yeah, of
in
course,
at
in France,
university.
everything is in French.
Because sometimes when international students go to these places, some things are in English. So yeah, wow, oh my god, and numbers and things like that, right?
Yeah, perhaps something now has changed. I know that some Erasmus students in Italy can take lessons in English. Perhaps in France is the
Mm-hmm.
same. I'm not sure. But anyway, at the time, everything was in French. Yeah, actually, and yeah, just to tell you a story, as I said, I studied engineering, so I was in a lab, and there was this device that they called Dell, and I thought, oh, I have never seen this device. What it is? And actually, it was just a LED. But as they translate everything, they translated
Oh wow.
LED in Dell. So there was a lot of misunderstanding like that in the beginning. Yeah, so I was very dedicated. I took a lot of notes during the lessons. I spent long nights translating in Italian or English words that I understood during the class. And that lasted perhaps 2 months. The real game changer was French lessons that I took in parallel, of course, because I met people and I improved the language, and this changed everything. The toughest part was, of course, the French classes, but also the moment of, the breaks. First, I didn't figure out where and when breaks happen. I stayed many days alone during breaks because I simply don't know where to go. And when
Mm-hmm.
finally I figured out how it worked, I joined the group, but it was very difficult to integrate conversation. So it was very frustrating. But I mean, this is the beginning in every country. Yeah, and then with this French class and also meeting people, everything changed. In particular, there was my neighbor in the student residence, and one day, he just knocked my door. He said, "I don't see you in the parties. How is possible?" He dragged me out of my room and he introduced me to his friends. And then, I discovered this international network, this international group of people. And yeah, I really entered the experience with it.
Oh, that's nice. As you mentioned, when the 6 months were finished, you had this professor that invited you to stay and do this PhD. I know that it was not an easy decision for you, and you talk like you mentioned already. You talk to a lot of people about it, their family or friends. I remember reading your article, and I guess not everyone had the same opinions when you asked them what they think. Should I stay or should I go? I think it's your article. So what eventually made you trust your decision? When we ask people for advice, it's really common that people project their frustrations and their fears, right? So they're going to give sometimes an answer, an opinion based on they would do, not what is best for you. So how did you navigate all those opinions and still trust your decision to stay? Because also it's good to remember you're pretty young. You're like 20 or something.
22 at that time, yeah.
Yeah, we're not that mature at that age, right?
Yeah, and you have the point. Actually, people project fears, frustration, whatever their experience, like my parents, for example, that lived abroad for a period, so they were projecting also their experience on that. I think that is important, useful to ask people their opinion to uncover the blind spots you can have, and then take somehow an informed decision. But actually, the most important factor for me is curiosity. Curiosity has always been the driving force on my decisions. And as I said, my hero is Alice in the Wonderland. As you perhaps have read on my post, I always say I follow the white rabbit. And in this case, the white rabbit was wearing professor clothes. So I had to follow this path, listen to everybody, and I had all the piece of the puzzles, and then I followed my curiosity.
Oh, I love that. And I love what you said about talking to people to see if they are to check those blind spots, maybe something that you are not seeing. I love that. That's a great advice. That's such a great advice. And then you can filter and decide. What would be your advice to anyone that is listening and is facing either like a big move or a career decision and they don't know what to do because they're like, should I follow my intuition or should I listen to this person's opinion? And I really care about their opinions, because of course, and we also should say that we don't ask opinion of people that we don't care about it, right? So that's why it becomes so hard sometimes to not listen to these people.
Actually, I think that it's important to get those information from people, to get their advice. But as you said, as we ask advice, opinion to people that we care about, this opinion can have a big weight on our decision. So it is important, I think, to make the difference between you and the feeling you have for these persons and the person's experience and what they project. When you ask for opinion, you should really think or why they are giving this opinion. Out of fear, out of their experience, out of love, and then finally deciding with what matters the most to you, because finally you have to live with your decision, not them.
Yeah. Yeah. We know that you stay after these 6 months and then you never go back to Italy. From reading your posts, it looked like you had after this person invited you to the parties, you started to live as the student. You were having a blast, right? And having a great time. And then, you started to work as a professor, because I guess that's what you do when you are doing a PhD in this academic world. You had a journey speaking French as a second language, and you wrote about all your insecurities around your accent. And I guess that's the story about people living abroad, right? When you live in another country and you speak another language, a different language. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm here speaking English and I'm from Brazil and you are from Italy, living in France, speaking French. And even if I move to a place that speaks Portuguese, it's different. And I don't know if that happens in Italy. Like, even in Brazil, some people would judge you for your accent because they know where you're from. So yeah, there's a whole thing. We can talk for hours just about those aspects of language. And I know that at a certain point you started to internalize the idea that your accent could be a problem. And I love that you pointed out that on your article that I love the empowerment speech around the accent because it means that you speak a second language, and that should be enough, right? But we know that it's not. We know that sometimes it put us in less privileged spot. And you mentioned this studies on your article. I didn't even know about it. That people often are perceived as less trustworthy, less intelligent, less pleasant to listen. And so I would love to learn more about your journey because you went through like a lot of ups and downs, and I love the measure that you eventually took to just be more confident. So it's a great story. Share with us, please.
Thank you. For me, it's a really big topic that actually during my PhD, I was a professor and a researcher, and everything or most of that was in English, something in Spanish because I lived in Spain, and something in French, but always in an international environment with people speaking broken English or broken French. So there was not so many native there, unless there's some students or some teacher, but we were really melting pot of culture. So accent was not really a topic at the time. But when I finished my PhD, the international students, researchers, went back to their countries or moved elsewhere. And I stayed in France and I took a job in the corporate world. And the company where I worked was a French company, so it was a big sign of integration for me. And in this company, there were very few foreigners. And in particular, in my department, I was the only one. On top of that, my job was trainer. Every day, I had to speak French in front of native speakers. So even if they didn't make bad jokes or being harsh with me, as I was a perfectionist, now I'm kind of recovering perfectionist. I want to be sure that they could really understand me because sometimes I use the word from English, my pronunciation was not perfect. So I started to internalize that could be a problem for my job. I took a drastic decision. I put myself on stage. I took theater lessons. I integrated a French theater group and I acted with the native speakers. My idea was that if I can communicate emotions, connecting emotionally with the audience, make them, I don't know, cry, laugh, smile, it means that they can understand me. That gave me a lot of confidence. And of course, that was a measure that helped me a lot with my job, but that also shaped my life because theater became my passion, a long-lasting passion. Till today, I made best friends there. I even met my husband there. And also when I moved to the Netherlands, I integrated a theater group. I built with other people two theater groups, one in English and one in French. So that also was one of the best decisions I made.
Yeah, it fascinates me that you were like insecure about it. And then you went there and put yourself on the stage, like
was a bit
being so
drastic.
vulnerable. Yeah, very like drastic decision and like bold move, and I guess we feel more self conscious about our roots, about our accent, about whatever when we are in this environments, like because you mentioned that you were with this native speakers. Because when you are in the middle of a lot of immigrants, it's one thing, but when you are in the middle, when you are the only one that is different, it's like, wow. So it was amazing. So sometimes we have to just lean into the discomfort, right? To grow.
Yeah, it has been for me at least, and I can suggest to others to try because theater, even in their own language, can be very useful to gain confidence actually in yourself, in the way you speak in front of people, in the way also you live emotions and you communicate them.
Nice. I love that advice. I never thought about theater classes. but I'm always open to try something new. So maybe one day. As someone that speaks so many languages, what would be your best advice to other immigrant women that are listening and feeling insecure about their accents?
I will perhaps tell a small story about that before
Okay.
giving advice. Some time ago, but it happens quite often to me. I met one of my former students because corporate is like a small world, so you meet again people. But I could not recognize this guy, but this guy recognized me because, of course, they were many students. It's easier for them to remember me than the opposite. And he said, I remember you because of your accent. I remember certain concept you taught to me because of your accent. And
Hmm.
for me, that is very important. I mean, what I would say to those immigrant women, your accent is your signature. It brings all your journey. People will recognize to you and remember you because of that story your accent tells. And it's not about sounding native. It's just sounding yourself. Don't try to hide it, to modify, to force it. Of course, improve as much as you can. It depends in which age you
Mm-hmm.
arrive in the country and, also how you can improve yourself. So leverage it as much as you can.
I love that. And what do you just say that is like the biggest lesson that you learned during this quote unquote accent journey?
Yeah, but it took me years actually to arrive to this lesson. But over the years, I understood that when you believe in your subject and the topic and the message you want to communicate, and you bring it with confidence, accent is not a barrier to clarity. Even the contrary, you can hook the attention of your audience with your accent. So,
Mm.
finally, what is most important? For me, presence and confidence. Probably because I have to compensate for my accent because, as we said, I internalized that as a problem. I developed presence, I developed conviction, and I think that at the end of the day, when you have to convey a message is most important to have presence and confidence than grammar and accent.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Being confident is very, very important. I still want to talk about learning, language learning. I would like to know more about your professional journey because you mentioned that you were this engineering, you did your PhD, then you went to the corporate world, and I know they went to Spain, you went to the Netherlands. Was all these moves were because of work, and you still in that field today, or no? Because I also saw that you work as a coach too. So, which is not even related to like the engineering. So, tell me more about that.
It's a good question. Most of my moves were driven by work, but because work was always a door for new experiences. So now when I came back to France, actually, I took a job in the corporate world, but with the aim of opening to human-centered topics. So I did many jobs with my engineering degree. Some very technical, some more human oriented. I was a manager, a project manager, and actually I know now that I thrive in the human-oriented function. So coming back to France, I took a corporate job, but more oriented, more focused on that. And over the years, I think during my years as manager, I understood that coaching tools are very useful to help employees to gain their own resources and solutions. And beside that, when I faced the return to France, that was a bit difficult from a personal point of view. I read a lot of books, resources, I listened to podcasts, and I read this book that was Coaching Across Culture, a book of Filippo
Mm,
Rosinski that is a coach with an engineering background. And
wow.
this book was really for me a game changer. Really changed my gaze on life and life abroad. And I thought coaching tools are not just useful in my job as a manager, but they will be useful for me as a person to understand better myself, for my self-development, and also to guide other people in this journey. People that build or rebuild their life abroad, or they build their career. I studied to get a coaching certification this year, and I got it a couple of weeks ago. So I started to coach people that are in this journey, and it's fascinating.
That's incredible. So you started in France, you went to Spain and then Netherlands and then back to France, right? What made you get back to France, to the place where your journey started?
I don't know. Lyon is like for me a safe place. Even when I lived to Spain, I came back here in Lyon. I left to Paris and then to Netherlands, and then there is like this elastic pull to this city because I feel well here. I mean, it's a very dynamic city, and there is something that make me feel well. But when I came back from Netherlands, I was wrong. Because I thought I can live exactly the same life as 7 years before with the same people
Okay.
in the same way. And actually, how we say, we don't step twice in the same river. The city was not the same. I was not the same. Even if it was difficult to have this confrontation with life, was a real important moment to understand what really is belonging. From this triggered also all the reflection that brought me to inclusion room and all the posts you find there.
And what belonging means to you, since you mentioned that?
But now belonging is something that is built from inside out. Is not related to a place or person or an environment. Is entering in a room and knowing which value I'm bringing. It's inner feeling of knowing that I'm not just an identity, but a mosaic of identity, living with all of this and leveraging in this unicity, in this diversity, to go toward the world with all of it.
So let's talk about the language. You speak Italian, French, Spanish, English, German, and I know that you learned German from scratch. From everything that I've heard, it's not an easy language, especially when you speak a romantic language, right? Like Italian, French. I guess is another structure, another kind of grammar, and different from everything that we're used to it. And in less than 6 months, you reached B2 level that was required for your role at that time. And a year later, you obtained the C1.1. I mean, congratulations on that. I have two questions. First is like, why you do that to yourself? and also tell me more about this story of the German language. I'm like, why?
This is always about drastic decisions, right? It's always
Yeah.
putting myself out of comfort zone. I have this need of learning, of challenge, and this is part, I think, of my personality. In this case, I got this role in this international organization that is a European Patent Office, and the work is in two languages, French, English, and German. And they hire people even if they don't speak perfectly, three of them. And you can arrive with one weak language, that for me was German. And then they put in place very nice conditions to learn quite fast the language. So this was the context. Yeah, in order to have my contract, my permanent contract, I needed to achieve B2. So it was tough, it was very tough. But at the same time, as you said, German is not Latin language, was a huge challenge, and I like this kind of challenge. So I put in place all a strategy, I started some months before going to the Netherlands with an immersion. I have my best friend that who lives in Germany, so I spent 1 week with her. I took a immersion class, and before going, I called the school And I asked which kind of students were around the table, because for me, I learn a language in the time off during breaks. So if the other students are Italian, Spanish, or French, would not be effective to learn a language in these conditions. So I wanted to be sure that were people from around the world, but not from a language that I can speak. Otherwise, So that was very interesting because there were a lot of Asian people speaking also very little English. So really German was our language of communication even during breaks, lunchtime,
Wow.
etc. Was really, really important that. And then the suggestion I would give to someone who starts from scratch like me is put the language, immerse it in all the slots of your day. You commute to go to work, podcast. Before dinner, I used to watch a series of comics, well, do it in the language with the subtitles or without it. Do that. Read in original languages. However, even if I like challenge, I would say don't start too hard. I mean, don't start with War and Peace or a classical movie, something that is really difficult. Otherwise, I mean,
You use
you
it
get
Peppa
frustrated.
Pig, right?
Exactly. So I started with Peppa Pig. The most important lesson with German was humility. So I really started with the Peppa Pig. And Peppa Pig was the best teacher ever because I mean the topics were very basic, but topic from life. You can laugh a bit as well. It is not. It is important as well.
Wow. And since you've learned so many languages, do you think is there like a difference between how you learn German, for example, from the way that you learn Spanish or French, or at the end of the day, it's all about getting in contact with the language, like you said?
That's a very good question. I thought on that recently because Christina from Substack asked me to write with her a post on how languages entered my life. And actually, they entered from different doors. French entered with these French lessons, a group of international friends. Spanish entered with my flatmate and I had a boyfriend at the time as well. And English in the beginning entered through the door of work and research. So it was technical broken English and then became the language of my reflection on living abroad and creativity. German was always related to work and never
Mm-hmm.
took root on me because was not language of emotion because even with the people that I met in the Netherlands, German people, we used to talk in another language. For example, one of the effective way I had to learn German was through a linguistic tandem. One of my colleagues had to learn French
Oh yeah.
and I had
Mm-hmm.
to learn
Mm-hmm.
German. So we spent hours switching languages. It was very interesting. And our fallback language was Spanish. But so the language of our relationship, of our friendship was Spanish finally, was not German, even if he was German. Because for both of us,
Wow.
Spanish meant living abroad, making friendship abroad. So
We know that language shapes expression, and you live between words and worlds in several languages, right? So do you feel that different parts of your personality come out more in a different language? Like how is Emanuela in French different from Emanuela in Italian or in Spanish or English, German? Do you feel like that? 'Cause there is this famous quote from Sofia Vergara in Mother Family. I never watched this series, but the quote was everywhere in social media because she's from Colombia. She's like speaking English in the series with an accent. She's this Colombian woman, and I guess she's having a discussion or something like that. And she said something to the guy like, "Do you know how I'm smart in Spanish?" because
Yeah.
she feels like dumb or whatever. So yeah. So how are your personalities in the different languages?
There are many me on me. If I speak Italian, you will see a warmer version, more expressive Emanuela. I get very closer to my interlocutor, and also without fall into stereotypes. You see, I speak a lot with the hands, but speaking Italian,
Mm-hmm.
I speak with even more gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Just to tell you a
Mm-hmm.
story, we received an Italian company at work some weeks ago. During the breaks, I spoke Italian with them, of course, and one of my colleagues said, "Oh, I have never seen you so expressive." But because in French, I think I have another personality. I'm more structured. I'm more rigorous, and I think that I know very well the nuance of the language. And I handle the language with surgery precision. You see, I'm like incisive, I would say. In Spanish, I'm more playful. You know, it's a language where I like to improvise, to put words
Mm-hmm.
from Italian, from French. All these Latin languages are a bit of a puzzle, and I like to see
Yeah.
how a
Yeah.
word can fit in a sentence.
Do you
However, I'm
try like maybe it's like this? Do you try it sometimes? I don't know how this word is Spanish, so maybe it's like this. I'll get from French or Italian, and you try, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I do that every
absolutely.
time with Spanish too.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that, and it works. I don't know, 40% of time, perhaps, but it works. It is funny.
Yeah, that's
However,
something. Yeah.
I'm very rigorous in the grammar because Spanish grammar is very demanding. So I stay in the structure, but with this, playing around. In English, I think that changed over the year. 5 years ago was, as I said, more this technical scientific language, and now is more explorative, is more my language of reflection. I have a wording
Yeah.
that is more poetic. German, I guess I'm hesitant be- because of the language is more difficult, but mostly because it was always the language related to work. So in the legal
Mm-hmm.
frame, I used to be. Of course, I picked up the correct words, whatever, but it was never the life of life. The language of life. So when I speak German, yeah, I feel a bit hesitant.
You still have opportunities to practice German, or you're not like speaking so much?
Uh, 2 weeks ago, I was in Vienna for an international organization, and I spoke German with the taxi driver.
Okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. That's good. You talk a lot about inclusion on your Substack. So I would love to hear more on how that interest started and why it's so important to you. Do you think it comes from this place of taking space in this country that is not yours, and because of the fact that you had been in this position for so many years and you had to do in other countries as well. So, and I know you're very passionate about the topic. So tell me
Yeah,
more about it.
absolutely. It comes from a misunderstanding that I saw a lot. That is the confusion between belonging and assimilation. You know, I'm convinced that you don't have to lose or erase your identity to meet the culture of your host country. And this is in the
Mm-hmm.
two sides. The host country also should make space to include you as you are. And in this game, let's say, is a win-win deal because you bring a diversity and you can leverage together as an individual, as an organization, as a country. You can leverage on this diversity to make a strength because each one bring a value into the room. For me, this is inclusion, is seeing how individual can make the difference in a group. I started to be very interested in this topic when I returned to France because I faced some situation that made me think about what is belonging, as you said. And as I mentioned, I went through this book and this theory of coaching cross culture of Rosinski. I found myself actually, even after so many years abroad, fall in the trap of ethnocentrism, thinking that
Hmm.
as Italy and France are so close country with just a border between the two, that the be fluent in a language and knowing the culture was enough to find my place. Actually, it's not so easy because the language is just one layer of culture and culture has many layers. I think that if you want to build intentionally your life in a foreign country, you have to dig and, being self-aware, and the self-awareness includes also cultural awareness. And you will see that even
Mm-hmm.
too close country, you can find the differences.
Can you give us some examples of these realizations that you had when you still got back to France? Because I'm very curious.
When I came back to France, as I said, you don't step twice in the same river, and there was not the same. I mean, when I came back to France was after having spent uh, 5 years in the Netherlands. So, for example, the
Oh,
feedback
you spent
culture
5 years.
in the
You
Netherlands,
spent
yes,
5 years. Wow, I didn't know that was that long.
5 years shape you. I mean, it's quite a lot
Yeah.
of time in totally another culture, a truly direct culture. So when you come back to France, you are not completely the Italian woman who lived in France. You are an Italian woman who lived 5 years in a culture from a northern country that come back to a French culture. So we are a bit a blend of all of it. For instance, in the feedback, Dutch people are very direct and in French people are quite less direct. This is an example in the workplace where you have to adapt again to the codes. Even if I worked before in France, when I came back, didn't forget, but somehow I changed my lens. So this is one of the example that I have, but in general, the communication also in organization is quite different. In culture, there are many layers, even organization layers. When you work in international organization with diplomatic exchange, and then you come back to an organization more based in operation, maintenance, the codes and the culture are different. And even if you knew before, but you are somehow influenced of what you lived in the between, we are never the same person. When I arrived, I didn't expect to have changed so much. After all these years of working on what worked, what didn't work, I understood all these layers and I talk of it I write it on my blog.
We know that moving to another country can be really challenging and very stressful. I mean, you made it look so easy, but I'm pretty sure that it was not easy, especially learning German. But when you look at your moves now, what questions did you ask yourself before saying yes to a new country or even like saying yes to coming back to France?
I think the most important question is what I'm moving toward instead of what I'm running for, because it's the best way to avoid regret. What is the definition of good life for me? Because it's different for all of us. And also it depends in the phase of
Yeah.
life. I read also a book very interesting about that. It's, Pack Your Baggage. The
Mm.
authors suggest several open questions about moving, building a life abroad, and that helped a lot me and in the move from Netherlands to here to build up my system of value somehow. Also, a question I asked to myself before changing of moving is which person I want to become after this move. Yeah, I think that it is important to have an idea of what move you, which are your values, how change over time.
After so many years living abroad, and you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that the reason I was not going back to Italy is because it became too small for me. So I'm wondering, what does the word home mean to you today?
Home is not a physical place, however, can be place. Let's say it's more related to grounding places. I have three places in Italy that I consider my grounding places. A small village in the south of Italy is called Scilla. Is the small village where I learned to swim, and I come back there even just few days per year. But it's the way for me to
Mm-hmm.
feel grounded. For me, it's important to keep the relation with your roots, to know from where you come from, to be
Mm-hmm.
grounded and rooted in yourself. The second place is in Tuscany, is a small village where my parents moved recently. It was more a family choice to move there. And Lyon is the safe harbor where I know that if I leave, I have this elastic pool that bring me
Mm-hmm.
here. But home is also something more internal, like an inner place where you feel safe. You recognize all your identities or the language you speak, everything that happens inside when you face a situation outside, and you see how you react based on what you have inside. And this is home.
I love that. And when you go back to Italy, to one of these places that you mentioned, how do you feel? Because you mentioned something on one of your texts, but it was not related to Italy. But it was, what is the name? You use this is it limb syndrome? And then I had to check that, and I found it fascinating because it's the feeling that you have, like when you, let's say, you don't have a leg anymore, but you still feel like you have it. And that actually made me think about the relationship that we have basically with the home country, with this place where we come from, because yeah, when you leave, and like you said, even with Lyon, your experience, you're not the same anymore. So that made me think about this, this feeling of I leave my country. The day that I leave my country, I have this memory of how things are, how people are, or people are doing, how things work, and all my memories of how things are, and I'm this person. But the moment that I step out of it, I started to shape a new identity. Then I go back and I don't find that anymore, but that still lives in my mind. So maybe that's kind of like the Lyme syndrome as well. That's how I feel when I go to Brazil. So I'm curious to know if you use that to describe your feelings as well.
So the Lyme syndrome I mentioned was related to another situation, but describe also
Yeah.
very well what you are saying. I described the situation where I came back after the Erasmus for the PhD, and all
Yeah.
my friends left. So I felt like I was in
Mm-hmm.
the same place, but without people. So it was like I lost balance, because I felt this lump syndrome. But I think you can also transpose this syndrome to Italy because most of my friends left. When I come back to Calabria, I never meet my friends because they live in England, Germany, I leave the city, but without the people that made my life in this city. So it's totally another
Mm-hmm.
experience. And also the way people live life is not the same I lived 20 years ago. So when I arrive, what I like is like being in a discovery mode. It's like being in between because it's your country, but you discover how people live in the country, And that's how
Mm-hmm.
I say quite often, I don't know how people in their 20s or in their 30s or now in their 40s live in Italy. I don't know what they do. I discover when I go as I can discover if I go as a tourist in another country. And it's very strange.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I guess my last question for
Hmm?
you would be for any women out there listening and they're feeling like the outsider right now, or because they are in a new country, or because they are speaking this language that is not their first language, or they are in this new job. What is one sentence you'd like them to carry with them after this episode with you?
Navigate differences with curiosity and openness without losing or erasing your identity, because it's really your strength.
Oh, I love that. Well, Emanuela, thank you so much for your time. I really, really love our conversation, and tell people where they can find you. And I'm going to link everything in the description, but feel free to talk more about.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. It was very interesting, this discussion. I really loved it. So, as I said before, I am working still in the corporate world because it's something that I really enjoy my role on that organization. But in parallel of this, I'm running a coaching activity. I just started actually. That is related to the blog I created 1 year ago. 1 year ago, that is the inclusion room that you mentioned. I guide people that build or rebuild their life abroad, or want to make the next career move with intention. I help them to reconnect to their identity, their value, their intention, to make the decision in the key phase of their life. And in the future, I want also to work with other companies to bring cultural awareness. I really think that projects don't fail because of technical skills. I mean, they can, but it's not just the most important factor. I think really that communication across cultures is really important to succeed.
Well, that is a great mission to have. That's amazing. Well, again, thank you so much for saying yes, and for your time, and for sharing your story. And for anyone that is listening, feel free to reach out to Emanuela. I'm going to link everything in the description. And other than that, we'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you again, Lama.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Emanuela, and I'm gonna link her Substack in the description below so you can connect with her. I certainly had a great time with her. And don't forget to follow us on Spotify and on social media, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. You know, every single step, every single action help us and maybe can spread the word about the podcast and spread the word about these amazing stories, and maybe we can inspire more and more women to pursue their dreams. So other than that, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, bye.